Chapter 9. The Fight. Hoggie and Scooter spent the next 3 days going through Libri's old construction plans. They were very confusing, not only because they were complex, but also because they were all mixed together, older and newer, drafts and master plans.
"I had no idea so many houses in London were designed by Libri,"
Scooter commented one afternoon.
"Do you suppose they all have secrets?"
"After 100 years, you bet they do."
Hoggie went back to her plan. She had been studying it for a good 15 minutes now. She knew right away that it was not that of the library, yet the place seemed familiar, and she simply could not put the plan away until she remembered what it was. The building was spacious and elegant, its many rooms arranged along a circular path, so that the windows of every one of them were facing outward. At the core of the circle was a wide staircase that coiled through all of the house's 3 stories, like an enormous beanstalk. Leading to the house from the south was a winding road, and running away from it towards the river was a straight and narrow path.
"Where did I see this?"
Hoggie wondered, tapping the plan with her finger. She leafed through one of the architecture books they had borrowed from the library, and suddenly came upon a familiar photograph.
"That's a plan of the Peacock Mansion."
The children stared at the construction plan with curiosity.
"It didn't have a groundskeeper's house back then,"
Scooter commented.
"And I don't remember seeing any paths between the house and the canal,"
Hoggie said. Hoggie knew every street and every path in and around the Regent's Park, because that was where she walked the dogs.
"Maybe it's just a water pipe."
Hoggie drew her nose closer to the faded drawing. The next moment, a revelation came to her in a flash.
"Scooter,"
she said,
"it's not a water pipe. It isn't a path either. It's the underground passage."
Scooter snatched the plan from her, and studied it carefully through his glasses.
"I think you're right," he said finally.
"Where do you think the entrance is?"
Scooter traced the narrow strip of the underground passage from the canal to the mansion.
"Let me see."
He tried to remember.
"There was a kitchen, and a pantry on the right, and on the left there was a living room, a drawing room, and a— My goodness!" he guessed suddenly. "I think it is behind the fireplace."
Hoggie considered this.
"Do you realize that we must be the only people alive who know how to get to the secret passage?"
"That's pretty cool." Scooter nodded. "One of these days we must check it out."
A few more days passed uneventful. In the morning, Hoggie and Scooter, as usual, would go to school, and in the afternoons they would confine themselves to the kitchen, trying to make any sense of Alexander Libri's fragmented floor plans and notes. By the end of that week, however, they arrived to a dispiriting conclusion that none of the plans from the architect's attic were those of the city library.
"We haven't really made much progress, have we?"
Hoggie declared gloomily, as she watched Ms. Chakrabarty take fossilized fish and mollusks out of a box and show them to the group of students. They were in the science class, their last class that day and that week.
"I wouldn't say so," Scooter disagreed. "We have learned about Alexander Libri. We've also learned that there are spaces in the library nobody knows about. I am 99% sure now that there is a secret room in the library."
Just then, Miss Chakrabarty finished talking about the prehistoric fish, and loaded the projector with the slides of ancient reptiles.
"And this is Sarcosuchus imperator," Hoggie heard her say, "otherwise known as supercroc, 12 meters long. Sarcosuchus could easily kill a dinosaur, and a creature the size of a human could fit into its 2-meter-long mouth hole."
The students gasped.
"Well, if we can't have the plans, we'll have to think of another way of finding that room," Scooter said. "Libri must have left some clues somewhere."
"What clues?"
Scooter shrugged.
Maybe he told someone about the secret room. But those people are dead by now, aren't they?
For a few moments, Scooter mulled over other possibilities.
He might have mentioned it in his diary, or in a letter to a friend. Do we know if he had a diary?
No, but I'm sure Catherine does. She would also know if Libri corresponded with anyone.
In that case, we'd better talk to her soon. Laurie Geiger is coming back at the end of the month. We'll have to return her key.
The next week went rather well. The year's first, though belated snow, fell upon the city Saturday night, hiding the oil stains and piles of rubbish in St. Clair's Lane, and draping the trees in flawless white veils. Higgledy and Piggledy, surprised, perhaps, by the new look that their neighbourhood had acquired, were on their best behaviour Sunday morning. Aunt Michelle finally had a day off from the gallery, and spent it with Hoggie and Prospero. Hoggie was in such a good mood the following week, she even enjoyed some of her classes. But then a disaster happened. It happened right in the middle of the lunch break on Friday afternoon, when Hoggie and Scooter were eating the grilled cheese sandwiches which Angela had made for Scooter. The sandwiches were so tasty, and made such a perfect ending to a nearly perfect week, that Hoggie began to wonder if she was going to make it through another year of school after all. They were sitting at their usual table in the cafeteria, crowds of kids around them talking in raised voices, and making noises with their plates and cups. Suddenly, Hoggie heard a pathetic little squeal. It sounded as if somebody was squeezing a life out of a pigeon. She turned around, and saw a tiny fourth year, with his head trapped in the lock of Pickle's left arm. With his right hand, the bully was pinching the little boy's nose. Brick was standing near, helping himself to the strawberries out of another fourth year's lunch tray. A few other kids around them were looking upon the scene, younger ones with horror, older ones with indifference.
"Say, I have a fat bottom," demanded Pickle.
The boy uttered, too congested and too terrified to be any more comprehensible. Pickle and Brick laughed.
"Now say, I am a silly little penguin,"
Pickle said, pinching the little boy's nose even harder.
"Wee wee 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 wee,"
the boy repeated obediently.
"Did you hear that, Brick?"
Pickle turned to his partner in crime.
"Someone has to go. Wee wee."
The bullies erupted in another fit of laughter. Scooter rolled his eyes. I wonder sometimes if those two will ever grow up. Hoggie looked at the little boy. Already his nose was all swollen, and there were tears in the corner of his eyes, tears of fear and humiliation.
"Let him go,"
Hoggie said. Her voice was drowned in the chorus of the fourth year's squeals and Pickle's guffaws. Raising her voice over the cafeteria's noise, Hoggie called out again.
You nasty little ape! I'm talking to you! Let him go!"
The cafeteria suddenly became very quiet.
"What did you say?"
Pickle turned away from the little boy for a moment.
"I said, let him go,"
Hoggie responded calmly. Pickle studied her with hateful eyes.
"Or what? You'll make me?" "I will if I have to."
Hoggie rose from her seat and turned to face the bully. Pickle squeezed the fourth year even harder, so that the poor little guy, all air gone from his lungs, started to turn blue. Hoggie made a few steps towards the pair of them. Everyone in the cafeteria was watching them now. The room had grown so quiet, one could hear the humming of the refrigerator in the kitchen. His hands trembling, Scooter fished the maths, the biggest and heaviest of his textbooks, out of his backpack. He was absolutely terrified, yet he was prepared to defend his friend in any way he could. For a few moments, the school's most notorious bully and his nemesis watched each other. Now that the enemies were standing just a few steps away from each other, everyone could see that Hoggie, though a girl, was nearly a head taller than Pickle. Pickle must have realized it too just then. A shadow of doubt crossed his pimply face. Suddenly, Pickle lost his nerve. He released his grip, and the fourth year bolted out of the cafeteria.
"Here," the bully said with a twisted smile. "Happy now?"
Hoggy gave the boy a long look.
"I'll be happy when I don't have to see your pimply face ever again."
The fourth years around them giggled with vengeance. Pickle blushed. His skinny hands instinctively squeezed into pathetic little fists. But then he once again noted Hoggy's tall, strong frame, and Scooter standing right behind her with his maths ready. Pickle was not at all sure he could win a fight against the two of them.
"One of these days you'll get what's coming to you, Claus," he whispered angrily. "I'm not afraid of you, Pickle," Hoggy replied calmly.
Pickle studied her for a few moments, his eyes pure venom.
"Do you know who my father is, Claus?" he said finally. "I know who your father is,"
Hoggy replied with a snort of contempt. From what she'd heard about Pickle's father, she had just as much respect for him as she had for the son.
"In that case, you want to be very careful, Claus, because my father can put you away, just like your mother."
Scooter gasped.
"What are you talking about, Pickle?"
For a few seconds, Pickle studied Hoggy's puzzled expression and Scooter's terrified face. Suddenly, his pimply face stretched into a vicious smile.
"You don't know?"
Pickle made a few steps towards Hoggy. He was about to say something very hurtful, and he wanted to be closer to his victim, so he could see her pain better.
"Your mother is a thief. She robbed a hospital. They've put her away so she could not do it again. I hear she is not coming back from prison until she is like 100.
Hoggy felt blood rushing to her face.
"You are a liar, Pickle! A filthy, stinky liar!"
The next moment, before Scooter had a chance to stop her, Hoggy threw herself on Pickle. In her fury, she did not notice someone's backpack on the floor, tripped and fell, dragging Pickle down with her. Next, the two of them were rolling down the passage between the cafeteria tables like a giant, screaming, wriggling ball. Pickle was not nearly as tough as he tried to look, but he was not a weakling either. Under other circumstances, their battle would have probably ended in a tie, but this time his victim's violent response was so unexpected and so truly frightening that the bully completely lost his nerve. Very soon he found himself flat on his back underneath Hoggy.
"Brick!"
Pickle called out to his fellow bully.
"Brick! Get her off me!"
Brick moved to help Pickle, but Scooter raised his maths threateningly and hissed,
"Don't even think about it!"
Brick slowly backed away. By then, a huge crowd of students had gathered around the fighters. The fourth years had elbowed their way to the first row to see the very boy who had been terrorizing them for months squirm and wail. Already the bell had signalled the end of the lunch break, but no one was moving.
"What is going on here?"
they heard suddenly. The crowd parted, making way for the deputy headmistress. At the sight of Hoggy sitting atop Pickle, smacking him on the mouth, Mrs. Hamilton's eyebrows disappeared into a mane of red hair.
"Claus!" she screamed. "Have you gone mad? Stop! Immediately!"
Hoggy was still too enraged to notice anything except her enemy, and she continued to thrust blows on his face until Mrs. Hamilton seized her by the collar and dragged her off Pickle.
"What a disgrace!"
Mrs. Hamilton said, out of breath.
"In all my years in this school, I've never seen such shameful behaviour. Claus, Anderson, what exactly happened here?" "Claus attacked me,"
Pickle said, sobbing and wiping blood from under his nose.
"He provoked her,"
Scooter interfered.
"I haven't asked you, Horshady,"
Mrs. Hamilton noted sternly.
"Go back to your class. The same goes for the rest of you. Claus, Anderson, headmaster's office, now."
The long bony finger, which she pointed at the crowd, produced the same effect as a magic wand in a threat to turn them into frogs would. The students rushed out. Scooter pretended to leave, but, once outside the cafeteria, stayed behind, and then followed Hoggie and Pickle to the headmaster's office. So did Brick. Hoggie had been to the headmaster's office before, but never before had she experienced such an overwhelming feeling of dread upon entering it. She knew that this time she was in real trouble, but even this new anxiety could not lessen her anger. Not even the long wait and the long row of chairs in the reception-room outside the headmaster's office could. If anything, it made her feel angrier, in part because Hoggie knew that Mrs. Hamilton made her wait on purpose. It was part of her punishment, and in part because Pickle, with whom she had to share the room, kept whining and threatening her.
"Stupid, ugly claws!" he sobbed. "I'll get you for this. I'll get you and your fat boyfriend." "Shut up, Pickle, or I'll smack you again," Hoggie warned him. Pickle moved 2 chairs farther away from Hoggie, but kept whining. "Stupid, ugly claws! Juvenile delinquent! That's what you are, Claws!" Just then, Scooter popped his head through the reception-room door. "Is Hamilton here?" he whispered, pointing with his chin at the door leading to the headmaster's office. Hoggie nodded. Scooter made a few steps sideways through the door. He wanted to be near Hoggie for moral support, but was afraid to run into the deputy headmistress. In the end, he hid behind an artificial tree in the corner of the room. "What is going on?" they heard the next moment, as Brick's dishevelled head, too, appeared from behind the door. "Where the hell have you been?" Pickle shouted at his friend. "And where were you when this ugly cow was beating me up?" Brick paused. "You what?" "I couldn't get in trouble," Brick attempted to explain. "I already have 2 warnings." "And?" Pickle was back to his mean, angry self. Not a trace of tears left in his eyes. "Hamilton would have suspended me." "So what? She's done that before." "I can't get suspended this week," Brick carried on patiently. "This week is the art contest. I think I can win." For a few moments, Pickle stared at his friend in disbelief. "And so you would just ditch me because of that? For some gay art contest? You're a stupid homo, Brick." Brick frowned. "I am not." "Yes, you are. You and your stupid drawings. Only homos like this crap." Scooter studied Brick from behind the artificial tree. The boy was pulling at the bottom of his jumper, both angrily and out of embarrassment. "You are a real ape, Pickle," Scooter said suddenly, and then, before Pickle had a chance to spit out another obscenity at him, he said to Brick, "If you want to punch him, we'll look the other way." It's hard to say how this scene could have ended, but just then the door to the headmaster's office opened, and Mrs. Hamilton's tall figure appeared in the threshold. Brick's head vanished in a heartbeat. "Claws, Anderson, inside." Scooter tried to make himself as small as he could behind his tree, but the deputy headmistress spotted him anyway. "Horshady," she said, "come out from behind that tree, and take a seat. I will want to speak to you later." With a sigh, Scooter sank on one of the chairs. "So, which one of you has the courage to tell me what you were fighting about?" Hoggie and Pickle were standing in the middle of the headmaster's office. Mrs. Hamilton was leaning against the room's window, with her arms crossed on her chest. Her gigantic figure blocked out the daylight almost completely, and the room seemed even gloomier than it usually did. The school's headmaster, Mr. Spodek, was here too. Seated at his desk in the room's corner, he was barely visible from behind the large stacks of letters, reports, and financial summaries. He was still holding one of the school's inventories, a calculator in his other hand, and a pencil behind his ear. He had a distinct expression of a man who had no idea what was happening.
The office might have been his, but none of the people in the room had any doubt as to who was really in charge here.
"So?"
Mrs. Hamilton repeated, after her initial question had produced no answers.
"What was the fight about?"
Hoggy did not reply. In her experience with adults, trying to explain to them why you did the things you did could only get you into more trouble. Pickle, wisely, also kept his mouth shut.
"Fine,"
Mrs. Hamilton announced, frustrated.
"Which one of you started it?" "She did,"
Pickle yelled hastily, pointing a blood-stained finger at his enemy.
"She attacked me." "Anderson, don't shout, and don't point, if you please," Mrs. Hamilton ordered him coolly. "Is it true?"
she then asked Hoggy. Hoggy looked back at Pickle with disdain, and at the deputy headmistress with defiance.
"It is. I had him first." "See, told you."
Pickle looked vindicated. Mrs. Hamilton pursed her lips so much they now resembled a rose-hip.
"Would you care to explain why?" "Because he's a filthy liar,"
Hoggy replied with venom.
"I'm not a liar."
"Anderson, I told you to be quiet,"
Mrs. Hamilton thundered. She then turned to Hoggy.
"What did Anderson lie about?"
Hoggy would not answer. What Pickle had said about her mother was too disgusting to repeat. She did not want anyone, especially people she did not particularly like, dragging Linda Clark's name through the mud.
"Very well,"
Mrs. Hamilton said, after a few more unbearably silent moments passed.
"Anderson, you can go back to class. See the nurse before you do."
Pickle unhurriedly walked out of the room. Already at the door, he paused just for a moment, and cast a triumphant look at Hoggy. As soon as the door closed behind him, Mrs. Hamilton embarked on a long speech about Hoggy's performance at the Regent's Park. In this speech, the deputy headmistress made sure to mention every little mistake Hoggy had made since the beginning of the semester, every morning class she had skipped, every report she had forgotten to turn in, and every test she had failed. The speech was addressed to Mr. Spodek, but it was obviously meant for Hoggy. It was supposed to make Hoggy regret her behaviour, but it did not. In fact, the more Mrs. Hamilton was telling her off, the more indifferent Hoggy grew to what the school's headmaster and his deputy thought about her. She felt, now more than ever, that she did not belong at the Regent's Park. And when Mrs. Hamilton, having spotted her total lack of remorse, said that they might have to expel her from school, Hoggy felt relieved rather than upset.
"Don't you like going to school at all?"
the headmaster asked, when he too noticed that the reprimand was not producing quite the effect they had expected.
"Don't you want to get education? To learn about interesting new things while having fun with your friends?"
What's the point? Hoggy thought. People only needed to go to school and get education in order to get a job. But she already had a job. The things she was interested in were not taught at school. She learned them on her own, at the library. And as for having fun with friends, apart from Scooter, she did not have any friends at the Regent's Park. But Hoggy did not say any of these things out loud. She did not say anything at all. The headmaster shook his head in frustration.
"I would like you to think about your behaviour, Penelope, and about your poor grades, and I would like very much to speak to your parents."
At these words, Mrs. Hamilton, who was standing behind the headmaster's chair, just as a shrewd and powerful minister stands behind a clueless king, bent over and whispered something in his ear.
"Oh,"
the headmaster said. Suddenly his voice and gaze softened.
"I would like to speak to your aunt, then, Penelope."
"You can go now, class,"
the deputy headmistress added.
"Tell your aunt to call the school as soon as possible. The teachers' council will gather at the end of next week. It will decide whether or not you will stay at the Regent's Park. In the meantime, you are suspended from all classes."
Hoggie was waiting for Scooter on the school's porch. It was bitterly cold outside, but Hoggie preferred that to having to explain to every teacher who found her loitering in the school's halls that she had every right not to be in class. She put her bag on the snow-covered stone stairs, sat on top of it, and wrapped her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. She could hear the distant noises coming from inside the school, the sound of a piano, and discordant chorus of second-years singing a song, and the bouncing of a ball off the floor of the school's gymnasium. Every now and then, to all this noise, Miss Pitkin's voice, dictating a passage from a short story, was added. I am so not going to miss this, Hoggie thought. Yet there was a part of her, a very small part, that wondered if she would. Just then the door at the top of the stairs opened with a squeak, and out stole Scooter. He threw his backpack on the steps next to Hoggie, and fell on top of it. So, how did it go with Hamilton? He asked.
Bad. I'm suspended for a week. And next Friday they are having a teachers' council to see if they are going to expel me.
They're talking about expelling you? Scooter was terrified by this possibility, a lot more than Hoggie was. What are you going to do? He asked. I mean, if they do kick you out of school.
I suppose I could get more dogs to walk.
Aren't you going to another school?
Nah,
Hoggie replied after a moment's consideration.
Schools are a waste of time.
Scooter did not think that schools were a waste of time, but decided not to argue. He just sat there for a few minutes, thinking about the sudden and drastic changes his own life was about to undergo. He did not like this thought.
Hamilton really hates me, Hoggie said after a while. What did she want with you, anyway?
She tried to find out what you and Pickle were fighting about.
You didn't tell her, did you?
I didn't, Scooter hastened to assure her. I only said that Pickle was mean to you, and that he had it coming.
What did Hamilton say?
Nothing. I don't think she believed me.
Typical.
Hoggie kicked the porch's railing.
What else did she want?
She wanted to know why you and I were friends.
What?
Hoggie could not be more surprised. She asked why I was friends with you of all people.
As opposed to who?
Scooter shrugged. Some other kids. She called them promising students. Frankly, I have no idea what she meant by that. I suppose she was talking about the kids whose parents are prepping them for Oxford and stuff like that. She asked me why I was not friends with them.
And what did you say?
I said that I was with you because you were a good friend and a good person.
And what did she say to that?
She said that I could be like one of those kids if I was not friends with you. She said that you were holding me back.
She said that?
Hoggie was both hurt and furious. Scooter nodded. She also said that she was disappointed in me. He rubbed his hands together to warm them up. And I said that she did not know you, and had no right to talk about you like that, and that because she did, I was disappointed in her.
You said that?
Scooter nodded.
That's really brave of you.
Hoggie savoured her revenge for a moment or two, but then the memory of Mrs. Hamilton's words pained her again.
Why does she hate me so much? Plenty of other kids skip classes and have bad grades. She doesn't badger them the way she does me.
Scooter considered this. Maybe she thinks that if she badgers you, you'll stop skipping classes and start getting better grades. Maybe she knows that you are actually quite smart. Maybe she is after you because she cares about what happens to you.
Yeah, right.
Hoggie remembered her most recent encounter with the deputy headmistress, and anger rose inside her again.
Pickle has been torturing you and me for months. He steals from other kids and tells horrible lies about my mum. And Hamilton and others act like everything is just fine. I stand up to him once, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. Pickle should be expelled, not I. Not that I'm going to miss this stupid place, Hoggie added, casting a resentful look towards the school. What?"
she asked, as she noticed Scooter lowering his head, and avoiding looking in her eye. "Nothing," Scooter mumbled guiltily.
"Come on,"
Hoggy persisted.
"spit it out. Do you think I was wrong to beat him up? You heard what he said. What would you do if some piece of slime called your mother a thief? Pickle is a meanie and a liar. Somebody had to teach him a lesson."
Scooter lowered his head even more. Any lower, and he could touch his belt-buckle with his nose. He studied the belt-buckle for a few moments. Suddenly, he took a deep breath, as if he was about to dive into a deep sea, and said very softly, "You're right, Hoggy. Pickle had it coming all year, and somebody did have to teach him a lesson. But he was not lying to you."
"What do you mean?"
Scooter took another deep breath. "Remember you asked me what HMP means?"
"Yes. Why?"
HMP is short for Her Majesty's Prison, Hoggy." For a few moments, Hoggy was speechless. The news was too horrifying. Her mother was in prison? She had done something really bad, and was now in prison, along with other criminals? Then, suddenly, she felt angry. They have all been lying to her. Her foster parents, Aunt Michelle, her teachers, even Scooter. They all knew the truth about her mother, knew what she was, and that she was not coming back any time soon, and none of them told Hoggy. "Hoggy, are you all right?" Scooter asked softly.
"I'm fine," Hoggy replied stiffly. "You better go back to class before Hamilton finds out you are skiving."
"I don't care."
"Well, you should."
Hoggy rose and picked up her bag. "What's going to happen now?"
"To who? You?"
Hoggy threw her bag over the shoulder rather violently.
"Oh, you'll be fine. Better than fine. Without me holding you back, you'll finally make that list of Hamilton's promising students. Me?" Hoggy snorted. "Who gives a peanut what happens to me?"
"I do."
"No, you don't."
Hoggy started down the stairs. Scooter jumped up and hurried after her. "What do you mean, I don't? Of course I do. I'm your friend." Hoggy stopped suddenly, turned around, and looked Scooter straight in the eye. Her own eyes were cold, very cold.
"No, you are not. Friends don't lie to friends."
"I never lied to you," Scooter started.
"You've covered up a lie. That's as bad as a lie. The biggest, scariest secret in my life, and you knew it, and would not tell me. And who did I have to hear it from? Pickle. And I thought he was a liar. It's funny, really."
She laughed bitterly, and then started briskly towards the school gate. "Hoggy!" Scooter tried to catch Hoggy by the sleeve of her coat. Hoggy turned around again, just for a moment. Her eyes were pure steel.
"Go away, Scott Horshaday," she said. "I hate you, and I hate this place. I am glad I'll never see either of you ever again."